Good evening, everyone. I'm so happy you guys are here. I have my special guest for Black History Month. It is Jamal Patillo, and we've had him on the channel twice already, but we haven't had him in a little while. So I'm excited to have him back. He's the home inspector everybody loves. So I'm going to let him introduce himself. Jamal?
Yes. I know you said tell them how long. So I've been doing this now over 10 years, somewhere between 10 and 15 years. I'm not even sure anymore. I'm getting old. Um, and yeah, our company is called Perimeter Property Inspectors. It's me and my brother at this point. We work mainly with investors now, but we still do a decent amount of residential, and we operate out of the Metro Atlanta area, but we do operate all around Georgia.
Okay. Tell me what is different, since you brought up investors. How do you do investor inspections differently than you do like a residential inspection?
The inspection side of it is the exact same. It's really about the conversation that you're having with the client. And an investor conversation is much more blunt and straightforward.
Right.
There's things that I can say to an investor that I would never say to someone who was buying like their first home.
Right.
Because a lot of times you're dealing directly with the investor, you're not always dealing with an agent.
Right.
And so, there's things that I can just be honest with them about. A lot of times with investors, like I'll spend the day with them going to look at properties, and we can walk up to a property and I can tell them nope, and we'll just get back in the car and drive off
Right.
because
Yeah. But
there's
a
no
first
reason
time
for us
home
to.
buyer, you have to explain why it's a no or what's
Exactly.
going on. And you can't really say no or yes
Yeah,
because
a lot of times,
there's
yeah, I don't get to say no or yes. I just have to
right.
be like, got a lot going on, and I hope y'all figure it out. But
Right.
yeah, with investors, we get to kind of help them make the decision. We're on that side of it a lot more than we are uh, on the residential side. So that's a little bit more freeing. But on the investor side of it, the properties that we oftentimes see are not the best, and so that's not a lot of fun.
Okay, gotcha, gotcha. All right, so Vaughn was the first person. Say hi to her, Vaughn Shay McCole.
Hey,
Hey,
Vaughn.
hey, it's just Happy Black History Month, and let's see, we have some questions already. Go ahead and put your questions in the chat. As usual, I get the first three questions, so I'm going to ask those first of Jamal. I might be able to make us bigger, Jamal, too, until we have these
Oh, there we go.
questions come in. Um, what is the number one mistake you see first time home buyers making when it comes to buying their first home, as far as the inspection is concerned? What do you see like people are messing up on?
Um, Typically, there people are worried about things that don't matter. I feel like we've talked about this before, but it's really important that folks understand what matters and what doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Cosmetic issues in a home, in the long run, just don't matter. They don't mean anything, uh, because that really is an eye of the beholder issue. And so, like, what's pretty to somebody isn't pretty to somebody else, and what's an eyesore to one person isn't to someone else. And so that those things really, especially as far as the inspection goes, they don't mean anything. Paint imperfections and even little like settling cracks, which I know can freak people out. They'll say it's a settling crack. It's a crack though, but it's like every house has settling cracks. It's a very small crack. It's not causing a problem in the house. At this point, it's still just a cosmetic issue. It's the house settled. That's what happens.
What
But
is
you
like
can't
the
let that freak you
Have
out.
you ever seen like a first time home buyer freak out about something specific that was like not a big deal?
Paint imperfections. I've had arguments with people about this paint job is bad, and it's like that
Right.
doesn't that I'm not putting that in my report. They didn't
Right.
do a good job painting the wall. That has nothing to do.
With
They
like
think
yeah,
it
the
because
overall
someone
house.
else might think they did a great job painting that wall. That doesn't mean anything.
Right.
I've had those arguments with people. The cleanliness of the house. That's I'm sorry that these people are dirty, but that has nothing to do with my inspection. Unless this dirt is beginning to degrade something and make it where it's not functional, it's just a dirty house. You need to have it clean before you move in, but that's not a reason to not buy this house.
Right.
That's
Okay.
that type of stuff where people begin looking at things that don't matter. You can pick a really pretty house that will give you thousands of dollars worth of problems, or you can pick a dirty house with ugly paint. You have to have. I always tell people you have to have vision to see beyond some of the things that are just jumping out at you and see the bones of the house. The bones of the house are in good shape. That's all that matters because the rest of this stuff ain't gonna cost you money. You need to worry about what's gonna cost you money.
Right. Real money. Real money. All right. What's my next question? What is something that's so expensive that if you find it, like say you're talking to your investors, if you see it, you're like, nah, move on.
Number one, foundation. Um, if there's any foundational issues, like true foundational issues, um, that's a no-go because foundational issues are very expensive. No matter it can be water penetration, it could be slippage of the footer. It really there's a lot of different ways you can have foundation issues. And any signs of that is typically a no-go. That is where investors are typically, that's all they want to see a lot of times is how was the foundation? Because they're ripping it down to the studs.
Right.
So they want to know what the foundation is looking like. That's typically all they care about. And if there's a foundational issue, that's a no-go. I would say after that is, roof, plumbing, electrical. Those are the big ticket items. HVAC. Those things start to add up. But number one is foundation. Yeah, if you got foundation issues, there's nowhere to go from there.
Gotta walk. All right. Okay, so this is my last question, everyone. We have about 78 people right now on the live. So they have questions for you, Jamal. It's coming. My last question is, do you think people should consider older homes? Because, we have an affordability crisis, right? For the most part, salaries aren't matching up with home prices and interest rates. So
Right.
some people, if they don't go the new construction route and try to get like the buy down of the interest rate, then they're looking at older homes. Is there like an age you'd be like, don't go that old? Or like, what do you say for older homes? How old is too old?
Uh, there's never too old. It's about whether or not the home has been brought along through the ages. Has it been brought along as we've learned more and codes and standards have changed? Was that house brought along with those codes and standards? Um, I would typically say if you're doing anything, it's tough because there's like eras where things were bad, but anything before I forget the date. I think it's '68 when the electrical changed,
Mhm.
and some of the plumbing changed as well. If you get into the mid '70s, you're typically good. The problem is then you enter into like the late '70s and '80s to early '90s, and we had a lot of issues there as far as
Right.
plumbing and
Like
electrical goes.
plumbing and some of
So
the siding and stuff.
siding
Yeah.
became a really big issue during that time. So you run into a whole nother era where we mess stuff up again. Um, but if you're really wanting, but if you can get past that, late '60s, early '70s, there were some things that were figured out as far as plumbing and electrical goes that you typically will not run into um, in a newer home. So I would say you want to kind of stay there. With older homes, it's tough. It really is an experience thing. If you are an inexperienced buyer, if you're not a person who has a handy bone in your body, buying an older home can be a really big ordeal. And you want to make sure every time that you have an older home inspected thoroughly. And one thing we've been pushing here lately, especially on older homes, if it has cast iron, is you want to have uh, uh, the plumbing scoped because you want to know what's going on in the lines all the way out to the street. And I know it oftentimes costs a decent amount more. It can oftentimes cost as much as the inspection itself, but it's worth it to know because the price of having your whole yard dug up is a lot more than
Right.
and even on new construction, we're recommending that. So it's tough. Like if you're not an experienced buyer, I don't tell people to go towards an older home because you really need to have an understanding of those systems and what you're getting yourself into because it can become a nightmare really quickly.
Okay. So I got my 3 questions in. Now it's up to you guys. And I think the moderator wants to pick the first one But thank you for joining. Those of you that are just getting on, we're about 106. Jamal is with us until 8 o'clock, so get as many questions in as possible. All right, Jamal, what are some red flags in a home inspection that might indicate structural problems? Are there ways? Let's do one at a time because that's two questions together. We're talking about mold in the next one.
I know
What's
they
in a
got them in.
Yeah, so in your home inspection or most home inspections, because you say you're internationally like certified, so you could do it in multiple places. So don't they just put it's a structural issue? Like don't they put, go ahead.
So, as inspectors, we are told one thing we should never say. You'll never hear us say, if you do hear an inspector say this, look at them sideways. We don't say things are structurally sound. That is a thing. That is something an architect, an engineer, they're the only people who can say that. What I will typically say is that I see some structural issues, and that I would recommend that an engineer or an architect come take a look at it. The signs of that vary, but typically you'll begin seeing cracks in a lot of different places. And I'm not talking about like the settling cracks. You'll begin seeing things begin to pull away from certain areas, and you'll start seeing uh, what's called like a differential. So you'll start to see a gap in certain areas where a crack will be more than a quarter inch, and that's our guide to call out an engineer. Anything bigger than a quarter inch, you got to go to somebody else because I can't make a determination on it. So large cracks, shifting in the walls, shifting in the flooring. If you start getting some plumbing leaks for no reason whatsoever, because that'll typically indicate that something's pulling. Um,
Is
if
it
you have
is the
a
quarter inch thing the quarter? Like you could fit a quarter in there?
no,
Is
it's
that
a
right?
it's no, it's just a quarter inch.
A quarter.
It's a
Isn't there a
quarter
rule if you
inch.
put a quarter in between the thing, it's too big?
No,
No, not
no,
that. Okay.
no, don't go by that. Measure it. Actually measure
Okay, actually
it.
measure. Quarter inch, not a
But
quarter.
you can see, you can literally look at, you know the difference between what is a stress crack, what is a shrinkage crack, and something that's beginning to separate,
Okay.
and that has a different look about it. And my experience with homes that have had serious foundational issues has always been, for me personally, they make you dizzy. It's weird when a house is really having has a really bad structure, things get off, and when things are off, your body reacts to it. Your equilibrium reacts to it, and a lot of times, like you'll literally walk in and just kind of everything just kind of off, and it gets a little weird. And you can typically see it that way. Like there's a lot of different ways you'll begin to start seeing shifting in the roof line. Like if you stand back from your house and you see the roof line dipping or the roof line shifting, that's a sign. Siding outside starts popping off in different areas. That's a sign. Like there's a lot of different signs that you're having structural issues. But the easiest one is you got big cracks in your foundation. You typically will have some structural issues. You want to get a qualified professional out there to take a look at.
Okay, so now we'll do a part two. It says, are there ways to detect mold issues? So I guess, they have mold, but then they painted over the mold. Can you like tell if, there were mold issues if you can't like visually, I guess, see it?
So the only way to detect mold properly is with an air quality test. Mold can be painted over if they use, especially if they use bacteria killing paint, then you won't be able to see it. But an air quality test will determine what's going on, regardless of what you can see or smell. Um, that is the best way, and that's what we always recommend whenever we come in contact with something. Like you go into a house that smells a little mildewy. You know what I'm saying? Even if I can't see the mold, I just go ahead and recommend an air quality test just to make sure. It's just worth having that peace of mind because mold causes a ton of health issues. And so it's better to know than to not know because we can't always see that stuff. I can't start breaking into the walls. So it's better to just have that peace of mind, have the air quality test done. A lot of times we end up having to recommend stuff that costs people more money, but in the end, paying that money up front saves you so much money in the long run, because you don't want to end up with those problems later. Yeah, air quality testing is the only sure way to know if you have mold issues. Even if you can see mold, it's still going to be an air quality test that determines how bad the mold is, how much you've got, what you've got going on behind the walls. So you want to find a good remediation company, or there are inspectors who are licensed in remediation and licensed in air quality testing that can do it. So that's the best way. Somebody just looking at it, because some is surface mold can be cleaned. So that doesn't mean that you have mold. Sometimes, there was just somebody left the window open and you got a little bit of surface mold and it can be cleaned. Air quality will let you know whether or not you have a real big issue in the house.
Hey, good question. Thank you, degenerate learner. Interesting name. All right. Next question. All right. Random username. We're getting a lot of random stuff. All right. How can a buyer give themselves peace of mind that a pre-drywall phase of construction went well if the house is already near completion when they found it? Okay, before we do this, let's talk about the phases of new construction inspections. Like, how many inspections can you get on new construction?
So if the builder isn't making it difficult, you can do a full phase inspection where you're there for every phase. You're there for the electrical going in, you're there for the plumbing going in, you're there for the foundation being poured, you're there for everything. Builders, 99 times out of 100, are not allowing that. That's very difficult. There was a time where we were pushing it and we were getting it, but that was halting things because we were seeing things that we didn't like. And so they don't let us really do that anymore, phase inspections. So typically now, what they allow is a pre-drywall, a full inspection, and then a final inspection. Those are the three inspections you typically are allowed when you're doing new construction.
Okay. So say that you missed those inspections, right? You only get the final. Is there any way to know what's behind the walls at the final?
No. So there is, we have infrared cameras and we can, there are a lot of inspectors and stuff out there that will basically kind of tell people that they're looking behind the walls. They are not. That is not what that does. And they need to stop telling people that. An infrared camera gives you certain information that you have to then decipher, but it can give you information. It can give you an information overload and tell you things. It can basically kind of lie to you. It can tell you things that are happening that aren't happening and tell you and show you something that is happening and it misrepresents itself. So you have to be careful with that. Once those walls are up, it is very difficult for us to know what happened behind them. The pre-drywall is an important step. It really is. It probably is the most important step. I can see so much more about what's going on and how the builder is progressing. That pre-drywall point, because in all honesty, once you get to the pre-drywall section, that house is almost finished. Once those walls and stuff start going up, they're doing cosmetic finishes after that. So the structure of the house and all your electrical and your plumbing and all that's run, being able to see all of that while it's wide open really helps to be able to see the quality of build that you have, whether or not this builder has been, doing things correctly the whole time. So that's important. I would say pre-drywall is definitely the most important. Once those walls are up, there's really just only so much information that we can give you as far as inspection goes. Definitely, we try our best to. I've always compared it to a stress test. Push the house to its limits before it breaks, and try to see what all the house is doing. But it's difficult because there are limitations and things that we're not allowed to do. So it gets tough.
Okay. So let me ask you this, and we'll finish out this question because you said, can we request it from a builder? I think people are under the impression that like the code enforcement or the builder, the county builder, the city, the city inspectors are inspecting these houses. What are they actually doing, and how detailed are they basically?
It depends on the builder. There are builders who do QC, they do quality control, and they have their own company that come. They'll typically have an independent company that comes out and does quality control. Most do not. So they leave that up to the buyer to basically do quality and control for them. Um, so, you're typically not, they won't have had an inspection done beforehand. They get everything set up and they get it signed off on uh, for occupancy, and they keep it moving. Like
Right. But so
you're
when they're granted occupancy, what's typically that county, that city person? Are they even getting out of their car, or are they looking at one of the houses and they sign it off on all the houses?
They no, they are. They do their job. We actually, I have an inspector that we work with from time to time who just had this situation come up, um, where the builder did a shady thing, and it looked like the city inspector had signed off on something, but he hadn't. And good for him that he had documented everything he had done. They had set the house up for him to come and check it, and all the electrical was correct. And then basically after he left, they took all of that because they were running low on supplies. And so they changed some breakers and did some other little funky things because they were basically staging each house to be code inspected, which is just
Right.
foul foul beyond belief.
Right.
And so they ended up having to buy the house back from the people who were currently in it because it was a total mess. So the code inspectors are out there trying their best to do their jobs. The thing is, the overall code inspector has a ton of knowledge. A lot of times they're hiring people who have some training but aren't fully trained in to know what they're supposed to be looking for. So some things do end up slipping by code inspectors. They're doing the best they can. I don't want to throw them under the bus.
I'm gonna let you keep your good relationship with them. Let me ask you this. My last question on new construction. So who is actually building your house? I think people are under the impression that it's like a builder who's been to school for building is building your house. Who's typically actually putting your house together? Like putting the wood in and doing all that kind of stuff.
Contractors,
Right.
just hired contractors,
Like a plumbing contractor, electric contractor, a framing contractor.
In this society we're in right now, especially in Georgia, you don't have a lot of licensed contractors, and that's because the laws changed in 2021. And so basically you have a lot of subcontractors. You have one GC, you have your general contractor who's typically the foreman. And then for the most part, you'll have some, like, they try to get as much licensed contracting as they can, but that's not always possible. There's a shortage on qualified labor out there right now. So sometimes you just work with who you can work with, and sometimes that's just, whoever's in town and knows what they're doing. And so that can be a little bit tough. They're trying to get whoever they can, some of these builders. So yeah, it's just contractors. We all know them.
Right,
We
yeah.
all
They
know
haven't
them,
necessarily
and
gone to school for building. Somebody taught them what to do. They follow what that person does.
no.
Yeah.
You're not dealing with unless you're going to the higher end of the homes that are being sold and at the 800,000 to $1 million range. That's not typically what you're going to be dealing with. You're going to be dealing with folks who just, they know what they're doing. They're not the best at it, but they know what they're doing, and they're doing a decent job. A lot of times what ends up happening is it's difficult for the foreman or general contractor to keep up with the quality of work that everyone on the site is doing. And so that's where things begin to slip through the cracks. It's not that, everybody, there's all these evil people out here who don't want to build you a good house. It's just hard to keep up with it all sometimes. And, sometimes you told somebody to do something and they just didn't do it. But then it got walled up and you don't find out about it until later.
Right.
When these folks moved in and now they're having all types of problems.
That's why there'll be like beer cans and food and all this kind of stuff behind walls and behind stuff. Yeah,
it's wild because a lot of them are basically, they're working there so much. They're basically living there. They're there all day and all night. They're eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner there. So, and they're tired.
Right.
And yeah, he
Yeah.
told us to do this, but I'm tired. I don't feel like it. And we're gonna halfway do it, and now that comes up later. But
All right.
that's
Good.
what you're dealing with.
All right. Thank you, random username. So we do, if this is a question for anybody, yes, you're getting inspections on new construction and resales. It doesn't matter. Get inspections on both. All right.
Yes.
Thank you for that question. All right. Are there things that come up in inspections where it might be good to consider walking away, or do you recommend getting specialized inspections? Okay. I think you're saying, should I walk away because it's too much, or should I go ahead and get some of the recommended inspections?
That varies person to person. So that really depends on number one, can you afford to have all of the extra inspections done? And if those issues are found, is the seller willing to take care of them, or are those things going to fall back on you? I never recommend walking away unless it begins to compound to a place that you can't handle. It's really about what you're able to handle, and and that's why I tell people you need to understand home buying and home maintenance so that you understand what you can handle. Because sometimes people think, oh no, that's not a big deal. Well, you don't know that, you've never been through it. And so until you go through it, you don't know how big of a deal it's going to end up being for you, how much it's going to end up costing you, how much time it's going to take. So it's best to learn as much as you can about home maintenance and what it means and how much things cost and the time it takes to get things done. And having the extra inspections done is always recommended. But if that many things begin coming up, like if I'm having to recommend that a licensed plumber and a licensed electrician and a licensed roofer, and if all these people need to come out after me, this house might have too many problems for you. That's too many people to have to come out here and touch the house after I've just looked at it.
Right. And I would say work with your agent, because if you're still interested in the home, but there are a lot of things, put it back on the seller to say,
Hmm.
hey, seller, my inspector said I need a radon, whatever. You could put some of that stuff back on the seller to give you a clean radon report, to give you or if you can't get a clean radon report, I need a radon mitigation system. You can't get
Yeah.
a termite. They said they had evidence of termites. I need a clear termite letter.
Hmm.
The roof has issues. I want the roof replaced. Like, you could tell the seller, negotiate with them to handle some of those things if you're still interested in the house. So all the cost isn't back on you. I mean,
Right.
I've asked for, roofs to be replaced a lot lately because I know it's hard for people to get insurance. It's hard for them to get covered. A lot of inspectors like Jamal won't tell you how old the roof is. They'll just say the roof is at the end of life, or, they may not give an exact age. They might give a range. But if you have a 20-year-old roof that's never been replaced, most insurance people are not going to cover it if you have any damage, and they're going to charge you more for that insurance. So it's going to be more costly to you. So if my client still wants the house, I'm asking that the roof get replaced before closing. So
Right.
those some of the things you can put back on the seller.
Yeah, that is. It's really important to push as much back onto the seller as you possibly can. I always tell people, there's nothing wrong with asking. All they can say is no. I've literally done final inspections where I go back and the agent basically took my report and handed it to them and told them to fix everything. And I'm doing almost another inspection. I'm like, somehow I came out on the bad end of this deal. I'm here for 3 hours checking the stuff that y'all got in this amendment. Like, this doesn't
Right.
make any sense. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with asking. There's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with trying to find out, what are you willing to fix here to help make this deal happen?
And
And yeah, it gets tough.
And Jamal made a good point. You always can pay your inspector to come back and check to see if those things were done, if the things were rectified. So don't just count on your own eyes looking at it. Oh, because there's a lot of stuff that happens where the seller will do it themselves. They'll just do a patch up job. And so you need to be aware of, did it get fixed correctly? So they do usually could pay the inspector a little bit more to do a final inspection to come back out after the seller says they fix certain things. All right, next question. Degenerate had 2 already, so let's try to get through some more. Tabitha says, I'm a first-time buyer and the home I'm purchasing is 50 years old. Is that too old? I think Jamal pretty much answered that question. He was saying, I'll let him answer again, but basically it depends on how good you are, because that would be like 1975. He said 70s, but sometimes, there's some problems there too. Like, how much are you willing to learn about what's in that house? And if you have some issues, being able to, handle them, right?
Yeah, it's really about your knowledge of home owning and home maintenance. That is an older home. Yeah, that would be about 1975. Um, are you prepared for what that house could possibly throw at you? Did you have an inspection done? Have a lot of the older systems been replaced? Has some of the old plumbing been replaced? Has some of the old electrical been replaced? Have they been keeping up with current codes and standards? I've done older homes where the people bought the house in 1975 and they were handy people and they were people who cared about taking care of their house. And so you walk into the house, and even though, like, it still looks old, they still have the same old cabinets and all the old stuff in there. Start looking into the systems, and the electrical panel has been replaced, and the water heater is brand new, and a lot of the plumbing underneath the house has been replaced. And so you begin to recognize, no, they've been keeping up with the important things of this house. So even though it doesn't look pretty, everything that's important is in really good shape. So those are the things you really want to pay attention to. Are your HVAC systems newer? Has the electrical even been touched since 1975, or is this the same panel that was put in, day one of the house? That type of stuff is stuff you really want to pay attention to, because that can lead to issues.
Yeah. And then pretty much I would say every 10 to 20 years, you should see some updates and new things. And like you said, of those major systems, they should have probably two roofs by now. So they should be on
Yeah,
maybe the second roof at least.
probably the third.
The third roof. So you should be
Uh,
in like the third roof, probably at least 2 or 3 HVAC systems. Like, so you shouldn't be getting the 75,
no, if you're
1975 stuff. You
if
might
you're
be getting
seeing
the 1975 carpet,
1975 stuff
maybe
in
1975
there,
flooring, but the major
no,
system should have been replaced 2 to 3 times by now.
yeah.
All right, good question, Tabitha. Thank you, and congratulations. Is there a certain kind of pipe homes that have copper? Like, is there an age that has copper pipes?
No, so copper's been used almost 100 years now. Copper is still being used because copper never had any real the issues. We know what the issues are with copper, getting pinholes, getting a little bit of rust and things like that. But so copper is still fairly widely used. There's no homes that require copper. You'll start to see copper in and around the water heater a lot, just because some of the plastic piping isn't good to be going into the water heater. So you'll start to see metal piping there, but there's nothing inherently wrong with copper. Uh, it still can be used in homes. It's not a problem.
What do they use for the most of the plumbing in newer homes, like PVC?
PEX PEX is what you're going to see,
How do you spell
and
PEX?
then PEX.
PEX. So most people are using PEX.
PEX.
Okay.
Most builders are using PEX, and then after that, you're going to see CPVC. Uh, PVC is basically just for cold water, so they don't really use that a ton anymore. It's CPVC, which has a rating for hot and cold water. So you'll see those two a lot in homes. You will still see some copper. You typically won't see it run all the way through the home. You'll just see it in a few different spots. But you'll still see some copper. But those are the three that you'll still see in homes.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Charisma. Let's put up, hopefully the moderator has it. Let's put up Jamal's information. He's giving you, if you need to call Jamal, he lives in Georgia, you guys. I think we've had him on before. People wanted him to do inspections in California, in Texas, and other places. It's just not profitable for him to like fly out unless you like somebody like that has it like that. It's really not that profitable for him to go to those places, because in general, what's the range of home inspection your pricing?
I stay on the affordable side of things. So my average home inspection these days is somewhere between 350 and 400. That's where I like to keep my pricing, just because, life's expensive enough and I don't need all the extra money. I'm not going to get rich inspecting homes. So I like to stay affordable for people. But what that means is there's systems that I don't use. I don't do infrared cameras. One, because I don't like some of the lies that they tell, and two, because if I did start using infrared cameras, I'd have to charge you a lot more because it's a very expensive camera. Uh, so I try to stay away from certain things. If you want some of those really high end systems and people looking behind this and that and getting to that type of stuff, then you should definitely go with someone who's got all of that stuff. And typically that will cost you probably about a third more. Those people are typically charging around the average between 5 and 600. But I try to stay in between 350 and four.
And a lot of times, you guys, you have to, and I'm gonna leave Jamal's information. It's in the chat, and I'm gonna leave his information up here. A lot of times, you have to save for at least 2 inspections because the whole
Yeah,
point of having an inspector is if this house, like you said, if you have to walk away because of the inspection, or if you can't negotiate with the seller on the repairs, you have to go through another house and pay for another inspection. So
yeah,
save for at least 2 inspections. I know people are putting in the chat they paid 575. They pay different amounts. Save like $1,000 just in case you have
yeah.
to have a roofer to come out, a plumber to come out, some of those specialists to come out. So save at least $1,000 if you're trying to wonder like what should I save. Try to save about $1,000. So if you do have to get an additional inspection, then you have that money. All right, next question. Thank you. And his number, I'll post it again. If you're watching the replay, it's in the description of the video. Degenerate, no more questions from Degenerate right now. I'm trying to get more people on the chat. Okay. So we can say because he had 3 already. Hello, everyone. Should you get your own inspection done on a new build outside of the inspection the builder has done? He answered this already. The answer is yes, 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 because the builder inspection is not detailed. You want to just speak on that? So we have the next question up.
No, they don't. Typically, they don't do an inspection. They may do quality control, and that will be from a typically an outside company. I think one of them, the biggest one, I think is called like 3M. They come in and but they don't inspect the house. What they're looking for is like paint imperfections and different little things like that that need to be taken care of. But like they're not checking electrical and plumbing and all that type of stuff. It is very rare that the builder is going to have inspected their own property. They typically do not do that. What they're relying on is for an independent inspector to come and do that.
Yeah, and let me say something about warranties because most new construction come with a 1-year warranty, but it doesn't cover. They'll come in and fix things that they find within a year, so nothing above that, any major systems. But then you got to fight them to whether or not they're going to do it or not. So a lot of times you can hold over their head that I'm not closing on this house until these things are taken care of. Because then you're kind of like, oh, is this covered under warranty or is it not covered under warranty? When they want you to
Mm-hmm.
close, they're going to make sure you do those things. And I had kind of the worst experience I've ever had with a client she did the inspections, but it was something that was like on the slab of plumbing, like under the house that nobody would have found. And so she was covered under warranty. When she washed clothes, the water pipe was going through the walls. There was no other pipe taking the water out of the house. Okay.
Oh, I remember
Yeah.
that
Remember this
one.
one? Yeah. So it was taken out of the house. So they came back. They realized they did it wrong. The plumbing contractor did it wrong, but they had to be in her house. She had to have mold remediation. She had to get all of her flooring replaced. They had to replace the drywall because there was mold there. They had to, and this whole process, you guys, probably took about a month
Mm-hmm.
in her home. They do not have to pay for you to be in a hotel. They do not have to pay for anything. The only thing, because we called like 3 lawyers just to see what was covered. And they said the only obligation they have to you is to make you whole. Meaning, okay, we messed up on this plumbing issue. We'll fix the plumbing issue. We'll fix any other damages. But hey, you work from home. I hope you got someplace to go. Or we just got to work in the house and we're going to come at any hour, come any time of day. So get your inspections done. Do not rely. And a lot of, builders will tell you, well, it's under warranty. It's under warranty. But think of the problems you're going to have unless you get those things done ahead of time. And a lot of times, you've seen it on the news and stuff like that. People working on with the warranty people years later on some of these houses because they find these
Mm-hmm.
issues and then it's hard to get them rectified. get them, they want you to close. They want their money. So if you can get everything done that you need to get done ahead of time, and the only way you're going to know is if you have an inspection report. They're not going to tell you. So yeah, something definitely don't skip on new construction inspections. All right.
Yeah, I changed my inspection protocol after that one.
Right. It was a lot. All right. So hi, first time home buyer here. Do you recommend getting a 203K loan to completely renovate a home built in 1968? So I have some experience. Do you do a lot of 203Ks?
I haven't done them in a while because
it's a
they
lot.
can be in. It is a lot.
Yeah. So ZVVE. Watch my I have a 203K playlist. So watch that. But for the most part, the problem you're going to come in the problem you're going to have with a 203K, it's a great program. It helps you renovate a house. You can put all the repairs or the renovations, even the appliances you could put in with your loan. But you have to find a contractor, a general contractor, a licensed contractor that's willing to upfront the money and have the bank pay them back. And that's usually the issue. The issue is, can I find a contractor that's in business and their business is, well funded or funded enough where they're willing to do a lot of stuff up front without being paid, right? And then get their money paid back on the back end. Because they have to submit budgets. They have to submit, things to the lender just to get approved to be your contractor. So that's number one. And so they have to have some familiarity with it. It's not these people you picking up, they do this on the side. They have to have usually an actual business. They have to be licensed. They have to be insured. There's a lot of stuff. So you want to find a contractor that has done a 203K before and recently. And you want to find a lender that has done it before and recently. So my answer is yes, it's a good idea. But on the front end, you need to find these people, because getting under contract, then trying to find them, you're going to lose that house. You need to find them ahead of time, then go looking for a house. All right. But watch that playlist. I did one 203K. It didn't work out. I've never done one since, to be honest with you. I was like, this is a lot. And the house was like 130,000. Like, I'm like, I ain't making no money from this. And I'm working with you for like 6 months. It's really, it's a good business if you have a good lender that knows what they're doing, and you have a good general contractor that knows what they're doing. So, but I give you some recommendations. Learn from my mistakes. I give some recommendations in that video. All right. Thank you. Rose, what if the owner doesn't live in the house? Is disclosure possibly accurate as to what is disclosed about what's wrong with the property? So I'll let you take this in a second, but I'll go first just for disclosure. A lot of times when the seller lives in the house still, they'll give you a disclosure, everything that they know about the house. And usually by law, they're required to tell you everything they know about it. They don't have to find out things, but they have to tell you what they're already aware of. So they call it latent defects. So if there's something that they don't know about, but it's in the house, it's not their responsibility. It's your responsibility in most states that you have to find out what's wrong, but they have to tell you what they're aware of, if that makes sense. Now, a lot of times investors, they don't want to tell you nothing. So their disclosures are really like, I've never lived here. I know nothing. I mean, for the most part. So it's really up to you to find out what's happening with that property. What have you found as far as disclosures? I know some inspectors started asking for the disclosure as part of their inspection.
I don't mind getting the disclosure. I would prefer to have it after the fact. I like to walk into the house blind and let the house tell me what's going on. That's just my personal preference. And then if I can have the disclosure afterwards to see if what I found is accurate to what the disclosure is saying. And that's really just me testing myself. But that's how I like to do it. But yeah, the disclosure is really, especially if they've been forthcoming. Like seeing a disclosure where they listed out a whole bunch of stuff is always awesome, because it's just like, at least these folks are operating in good faith. They're trying their best to let you know, hey, we've had issues with this house and this is what we did to fix them. So that's awesome. An empty house, yeah, if it's an empty house because the people just moved out, and they still filled out the disclosure, that's not a big deal. Like you said, a lot of these corporate investors and stuff like that, they may or may not know what's going on with the house, but they're not going to tell you. They're not going to say anything at all. Their disclosure is literally nothing. They don't know when the roof was replaced. They don't know how old the HVAC system. They don't know anything. They just bought a house and they know nothing about it. And somehow that's how they're living. I don't know how that works, but yeah, it gets tough when you're dealing with an investment company, and that disclosure is empty. Yeah, then you want a very, very detailed inspector to try to figure out everything that's been going on in that house.
All right, very, very good. L has a super chat. Thank you, L, for the super chat. I think Jamal already answered this, L. I think some people are just coming in. We're at 172. Please like, subscribe, all of that. But give her your top, your number one deal breaker, and then anything else you want to add to that. We'll say it again.
Number one was foundation issues. Foundation issues are the most expensive thing you will ever deal with typically in a home. Any big foundation issues, whether it's moisture or shifting, though, that's number one. And then after that, it's roof, plumbing, electrical, all of that stuff, HVAC. Those are your big ticket items in a house. But anything foundational, truly a foundation issue, will typically cost you a lot of money. If it's a structural issue, where the footers need to be repaired or they need to put piers in, that can range anywhere from $10,000 to $100,000, depending on how bad it is. If it's a moisture issue where they have to call out a remediation company, that easily, especially I can't think of the name of the company now, AquaGuard. AquaGuard, you call them out, and I never recommend people call them out, but they do good work. But AquaGuard's gonna charge you $15,000 to show up, like so.
Right.
Foundation issues cost a lot of money. Those are typically the ones that you end up having to walk away from. Anything foundation, it's just going to be too much. I've seen it done. I've seen realtors who got the folks to come out there and dig the whole yard up and fix it, but because it does have, if you want to sell your house and I find foundation issues, you're going to have to fix it. Right. But it is expensive.
All right, I'm not gonna put Degenerate's question up here, but he had a pretty good follow-up. He said, how can you vet an inspector to make sure they're gonna do a thorough inspection? How can you vet someone to see if they're a good inspector?
Vetting an inspector, you want to go and look up their licensing. The nice thing about InterNACHI is you can basically go and look up my licensing online, and make sure that I am, in fact, an InterNACHI certified inspector. So that's one way. And then just talk to your inspector. Ask questions. An inspector should have answers for you. If you ask a question, they should be able to answer you. And ask specific questions. Don't ask the one question that people ask that's annoying. So what do you do? I inspect homes. What does that entail? That entails me inspecting the house. You got to have a specific question. I'm not about to explain to you my job. Right. Like, that's not how this works. Have specific questions that you want to ask your inspector, and they should be able to give you a very specific answer. And if they can't give you an answer as to how they inspect a certain system or how they do this or how they do that, then you definitely don't want to deal with that inspector. They should be able to tell you how they get certain things done. Ask them how they inspect the plumbing. Like, okay, how do you typically inspect the plumbing? I typically walk in and I check the pressure first, and then I go throughout the house and turn on all the water. That you won't typically see a lot of inspectors do that. That freaks them out. But that's what I like to do because it shows me a ton of issues. It shows me a lot of different things in the house. So I'll have all the water running on low and cold in the house for 45 minutes to an hour. That's what I personally like to do because it shows me things that I otherwise wouldn't see. Your inspector should be able to answer simple questions like that.
Okay, good question. Real quick, Diana says, does inspection include electrical and pipes?
Yes, every inspection should include electrical and pipes. One issue you can run into, especially these days, we live in a litigious society. And so you will have inspectors who begin leaning back on what's called SOP, standard operating procedures. Standard operating procedures, if you are a licensed inspector, basically protects you. But what it also does is it basically tells you not to do anything. It tells you to walk around the house, look at it, and then walk out. So you have to be very careful with inspectors who are really leaning on standard operating procedures. We are encouraged to go above and beyond standard operating procedure. So like with the electrical, with the main electrical panel, that dead front, I am not required to remove that dead front and look at the wiring, because that's dangerous. And you need to know what you're doing before you just start taking that apart. But I do on every home because I want to know what's going on with the wiring. So you need to know, it is good to ask your inspector what their standard operating procedures are, how in depth they're going to go, what they're comfortable with, because it really is, it's up to each inspector's comfort level. I will walk a roof. I will walk a 1-story roof. 2-story roofs, I don't walk anymore. Number one, because insurance won't cover me if I don't have a spotter or I'm not anchored. So if I fall, that's just on me. And also just because I just know too many people who have hurt themselves and died walking 2-story roofs, so I'm done with that.
Brother, you use a drone though.
We use drones now, but sometimes people really want you to walk that roof, and I'm just like, that's not me anymore. I don't walk those tall roofs anymore.
So ask what they do. This is a follow-up for me. When should the buyer get there? So I always like to, I'll call you, Jamal, and say, okay, about what time you want to be finished? So I'm not disrupting you, but I want to hear it from your mouth. Like, I want to hear what you say to me versus just looking at the inspection. So when do you recommend that the buyer who hires you comes to the inspection? Are you annoyed if they come the same time you come and they're like, what's that, Jamal? What's that, Jamal? What do you see there, Jamal?
I don't mind people being there from the start. If you're going to be there from the start, let your inspector start their process in silence if possible. And typically, if it's been quiet for a while, once I get into my groove, I'll let them know, hey, you have any questions, feel free to ask, because I will get into my groove and forget you're there. But yeah, let your inspector kind of get into their groove, understand that things that you're seeing may be important to you, but like, I'm in a groove. So I have a process that I go through, and I know that something over there is important to you, but you want me to find everything in the house, not just this one thing. So you can't be pulling your inspector over to look at things, because I'm going to get there. I'm going to get to that, but that's not, I have to go through my process of going through the house, or I'll miss something. It's very easy for us to miss things if our process is thrown off with people talking to us and asking us questions. So I encourage people to be there. I encourage people to ask questions. The best thing to do is to show up about 30 to 45 minutes before the inspection ends. Typically, the average inspection is about somewhere between 2 and 3 hours, depending on the size of the house. So if you can get there, at about the 2-hour mark, that's perfect. Because typically I've gotten enough done. I have a feel for what's going on in the house by then. And even if you do stop me, I can stop and talk to you and start explaining things to you and get you to a place where you're comfortable. And then I can go back and finish what I was doing.
Okay, good. So Nana Minsa says, hey, Shahida and Molly Mall. I'm a fairly new agent in Pennsylvania. As an agent, what specific inspections would you suggest I recommend my clients to do? There are a plethora of inspections, radon, etc. I'm going to answer first. I'm going to let Jamal answer. So as a new agent, this is what I recommend. Number one, you give them a list of inspectors. I love Jamal, right? Jamal's like top of my list. However, I'm not going to get stuck with Jamal just in case. I'm going to cover my butt. They said, well, you told me to use Jamal, and Jamal did this, right? So I'm always giving them a list of inspectors. And even at the end, I say, but feel free to hire your own person, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm giving them people that I've used in the past. I'm not giving them anybody that I haven't worked with. And even if it's a large company, I'm going to put on the side, use this person, use Jim and Frank, use blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. Because those are the people I've had experience with. So if you're a new agent, ask another agent in your office to give some recommendations. Never just give one person. Let them have to do a little bit of homework and figure out what's the best person for them to use, okay? Usually they pick Jamal, but they may not. So make sure you're doing that. And then I also have a list of all the possible inspections that they could get on their house. And I give that to them early. One thing about first-time home buyers, I love y'all, but y'all like to blame folk for, for any error that maybe you didn't do. And so because I've been doing this so long, I've learned to say, okay, Let me show you everything up front. This is every inspection that you could have gotten on this home, and you're going to have to decide what inspections are most important to you. Now, like something like radon, there's certain parts of Georgia that are more radon prone, or that have more rock, I guess, in certain
Mhm.
areas. So if I know a lot of people in this neighborhood have radon mitigation systems, I'm usually going to tell them that and say, hey, the last two people that I closed, they had to get a radon mitigation system, meaning you don't have to, but you might want to get a radon test, right? So just your familiarity with the area is important. A lot of older homes have septic tanks. I'm telling them you probably should get a septic tank inspection, or we have to have the seller do one. So cover yourself and know that, have a list. Ask your broker. That's where I got mine from. And, it's a list of all the inspections that they can possibly do. So they're aware, because if they're a first time home buyer, they're not aware of all the inspections. So they can go through that list. And what happens, you guys, is most people can't afford to do that whole list. Like
No.
there was the person that had me start this list or get this list was somebody that didn't get an asbestos inspection. Now, an asbestos inspection costs like $2,000. You have to schedule it ahead of time by a certified asbestos person, all this kind of stuff. And she was worried that this older house, may have asbestos. The inspector didn't say it had it or didn't have any evidence of it, but she came back to me, I want to get an asbestos inspection. And I'm like, okay, you can get one. And I extended the contract so she could get one. But again, it cost like $2,000. She had to wait to get a certified person. So it wasn't something she could afford anyway, but it made me like think, okay, I need to get every inspection that's possible so they're aware of the things that they can do and they can do some research on that cost. That's my answer. I know it was long, but anything that you would say for a new agent?
For a new agent, all of that was great advice. Definitely have yourself a list of inspectors. Yeah, you don't want to get caught just referring the same guy, because yeah, if I mess up, they coming back to you saying you told me to use this guy.
Right.
So definitely have yourself a list of guys that you're comfortable with sending them, and then like you said, tell them they can go and find their own if they want to. I tell people, hey, look, don't just be calling me. Talk to a bunch of different. You want to find an inspector that you're comfortable with and that is going to get to all the things that you want them to get to. So definitely do that. Listing things out for your people, sometimes that can be overwhelming for them because, like you said, they don't know what all this stuff is, and a lot of times they can't afford to have all that done anyway. So that gets tough, but it really depends on. My suggestion to agents is, when you get it requires more work on your end, but when you get to certain, if you're taking them to a certain age range of homes, then the list of things that need to be looked at in that age range, like you said, asbestos is only a certain span of time. So if you're taking them to houses where there could possibly be asbestos, that's something you're going to want to always be pushing them towards. Hey, remember, we're in that period of time where the siding could be asbestos, the insulation could be asbestos, the stuff that the insulation that the pipes are wrapped in could be asbestos. Like, it could be everywhere, and that the siding is really the only thing that we can see that we can call asbestos. Everything else has to come from a certified inspector who can come in with the hazmat suit and start pulling stuff apart. And that does cost a lot of money. Radon, if you're in a certain area, learn the map. You say you're in Pennsylvania, there's a radon map for your state. Learn that map. Understand the areas that you're working in and whether or not radon is high in that area. Every state has a radon map, and it'll let you know this area is high, this area is low. You want to learn that map, have that map on hand, so you know whether or not you're even in an area that has a lot of radon. Sewer scopes are important. We're very big on sewer scopes these days.
Explain what a sewer scope is.
So a sewer scope is basically a camera that goes down into your drainage system and basically checks to see if you have any cracks in the lines, seeing if you have any backups in the lines, that type of stuff. And especially, honestly, these days, every house kind of needs one. It's not an old house thing, it's a new house thing as well. I think there was a report a couple years ago from insurance companies that said that I think it was 20%, 1 in 5 homes new construction had sewer issues, which is a ridiculous number, just a ridiculous number. And I've seen it myself. I can testify to it. It is crazy the amount of new construction homes that have major plumbing issues. So it is sewer scopes have become very, very important. Air quality testing, that's hard to push because it really depends on whether or not you feel like you have mildew or mold. If you're a person who is sensitive to that, you got a kid with asthma or something like that, those are things you want to push. Like people who have kids, they're going to be living in the basement or something like that. You want to push air quality testing. So it really depends on your buyer and the area you're taking them to. And you can get real specific with that and create a package for each of your buyers that help them understand where they're at and the things that are specific to this area and what they should be trying to do. Because going through that whole list, that's literally why we exist. Like inspectors are here just because you can't pay to have a plumber and an electrician and all these folks come out. It'll run you thousands of dollars just to have your house inspected.
Right. All right. Good answer. Okay. We're at 8 o'clock. I'm going to take the last 5 questions. I'm going to choose them, moderator. This won't count because I think it'll be a quick one. It says, should all panels handle 200 watts?
No, there's 150, there's 100-watt panels. It depends on the size of your house and what's necessary. It just depends.
Okay. Good question. Good answer. All right, y'all. I have my master class, so make sure that you're aware of that. That link is in there. So, and in my master class, I have a sample inspection report I got from Jamal, or I got it from your brother. I can't remember. So we have a sample inspection report. I also have a sample new construction pre-drywall report. So you have an idea of what those things look like before you actually, hire your inspector and what they're going to, see and what they're looking at. So make sure you're getting that. I have at least 3 inspections in there because a lot of first-time home buyers have never even seen an inspection report. So I have that as part of my master class. All right. So please do that. Jamal's information is also in the chat and in the description of this video if you're watching the replay. All right. I had the question. Let me go find it, Jamal. Jamal does not have a YouTube. My first video with Jamal was probably 4 years ago. Or 3 or 4 years ago, at least.
Yeah.
And I said, you should get a YouTube, and not yet. So he doesn't have one now. Maybe in the future, maybe he'll do it, but not right now. All right. Mustafa says, this is the one of the 5. Mustafa says, if the HVAC system in the house are 20 years old and are working properly, is that something you should be concerned about?
It's not necessarily something that you should be concerned about. It really depends on the condition of them. It depends on the manufacturer and the condition. Now, here is the thing. Once you get beyond, so heating systems get 20 to 25 year lifespan. Cooling systems get a 12 to 15. So when you start getting beyond those lifespans, there are no guarantees. You've already passed manufacturer's warranties. And basically it may be working today, because one thing I always tell people is an inspection is a snapshot day in the life of your house. Tomorrow, this is a different house. So we're doing all we can to get the house to tell us as much as we can today. But tomorrow it might do something a little funky. So today the HVAC worked, but it's past its life expectancy. Tomorrow it might go out. So one thing we recommend, and I know that Shahida recommends it, and all good realtors, get yourself a really good home warranty to cover those appliances, that when you have older appliances like that, because home warranties try to fill in the gap in between you having to go through your insurance to have that stuff done, because you don't want to be hitting your insurance for every little thing that happens in your house. Your insurance is for the big stuff. Those home warranties will oftentimes cover your smaller appliances, kitchen appliances. Some of them will even cover plumbing, roofing. They'll cover a lot of different things. That's what we recommend when you have some older appliances, older HVAC system. If it's working, because all I can then say at that point, especially if it's working really well, you just got to keep your eye on it and be ready for the day that it goes out.
And Mustafa, I would say too, I ask my clients, how much money do you have saved? Because sometimes if you don't have a lot of money, right? So like I said, it's a snapshot. We know what the inspector is going to put on the inspection report is at the end of life, right? But they don't know exactly when it's going to go out. So let's say it goes out next year, but you done put all your money in a closing costs and down payment.
Yeah.
And some HVAC systems could cost you $7,000. They're not
Hmm.
cheap. So I usually ask, like, how much money do you have if this goes out? And if they don't have a significant emergency fund, then I'm saying, okay, if the seller can't give us a credit or credit you something towards your closing costs so you can save some of the money you were going to use for your closing costs and that sort of thing, then we might need to walk away because you can't handle that emergency.
Right.
And a lot of times warranties are good, but they're not replacing stuff. They'll come out and
No.
tweak it or something like that. But if it's dead, and there's a lot of HVAC, like, updates and all that kind of stuff, Freon, and there's a lot of rules nowadays about what they're
Hmm.
willing to do and what they're not willing to do on older systems. So I just
Yeah.
like to say, have some money there. Nakia is trying to play. She says, I've heard that Atlanta inspectors and realtors are in cahoots. And they are the realtor making a sale by any means necessary. And I think this is, Nakia, I know you're joking, but I think this is like a thing that people think, and this is a lot of places, especially if you only give one inspector. That's why I don't give no one inspector, because I want you to say you've made the decision as to what inspector you chose. Because I know a lady who I've had, in my Facebook group. That house was, mold and mildew. It was like a whole bunch of stuff. I think she had to foreclose on the house because she couldn't get anybody to buy it. But she was moving from another state to Georgia. The realtor recommended an inspector. She wasn't even there, I don't think, for the inspection. Everything went. She moved into the house, and I think 6 months later, it was like all terrible. So you really have to take it on. Like, it's not your realtor should be a person of resource to you. But you are the person that should hire every professional that you are going to use. If the realtor's like, oh, use this person, use that person, then that should be a red flag to you to say, you know what, I'll take your recommendation, but what do you have any other recommendations, or do your own research as well? Don't just go by that first person. But we're not all in cahoots. We really are not. All right, thank you. Let that be number 2. Charisma said, is there a public record if work has been done in the house that you're aware of?
If permits were pulled, and that is why a lot of the laws were changed here in Georgia, where you have to be a licensed contractor to pull a permit. If permits were pulled, yes. If a permit wasn't pulled, then no. And I've done plenty of houses where I see changes that were made in the home that don't look like they were done well. And the first thing I'll recommend that the buyer do, and the agent, y'all need to go and find out if this work was permitted. Because unpermitted work can be required to be removed if code enforcement finds out that unpermitted work was done to a home. Does it happen all the time? No, but you don't want to be the person it happens to. So if a permit was pulled, there's records on all that stuff. But if these folks went and did a bunch of work and didn't pull a permit, or they had their friend come out there and help them add on to the house or do this, you might not have any record, and there might not be any permits showing where this stuff was done and done correctly.
All right, good. That was 2 or 3. Shelby says, hey, Shahida and Jamal, should I avoid buying a home with a sump pump or pit because of the maintenance?
No. So a lot of older homes were designed to allow moisture and water to pass through them. A lot of times you'll see like the reason a lot of old basements and stuff like that have moisture issues is because they were never meant for you to live down there. Those basements and stuff like that, even though it's a large space, the builders never intended for people to go down there and start building out rooms. That entire space was designed for moisture to pass through. So those areas, those sump pumps and all of that type of stuff, there's a reason a lot of times you go down there and it'll all be at an angle. Those old homes were built really well, but they were designed to allow moisture to pass through. That sump pump is designed to pull all that groundwater and pump it out. So there's nothing wrong with a sump pump. The maintenance on a sump pump is literally when it stops working, replace it. That's it. That's right. The maintenance on a sump
maybe
pump.
Your homework is just to know how much it costs to replace it.
There you go.
You can plan for that. This is going to be, I'm not going to hold you too long. What are What about solar panels? If there are solar panels on a roof, how can you check the roof?
Can't. I can't look underneath those solar panels. If someone has put solar panels on their roof, that roof, honestly, it's tough because insurance a lot of times has to have checked all of that beforehand. So if that starts to fall outside of our purview, because one, I can't touch those solar panels. Number two, I can't see underneath those solar panels. And there's no representation I can get of if those solar panels have damaged the roof when they were put on. Like, that becomes impossible. Solar panels are tough. Yeah, if a roof has solar panels, that becomes the responsibility of the company that installed the solar panels.
Okay, very good, very good. Okay, last two. This one, the Overcomers channel. Hey, Shahid and Jamal, thank you for this live. How significant is the inspector if the inspector can't get all the way through scope and crawl space shows rusty pipes? Would you recommend a plumber? Like, are you crawling in the crawl space?
Yeah. So any crawl space I can get into, I'm going corner to corner. You want your inspector to get in the crawl spaces aren't fun, but your inspector should be in there and checking as far as they can get. Not everything is accessible inside of a crawl space. It is difficult to get to some spots. Some are too tight for us to move through. Anything 18 inches, I believe, and lower, we literally just aren't required to get in there. Anything that's dangerous, that type of stuff. But you want your inspector to get in there and check as much as they can. A lot of times, inspectors, if I get in there and the place is bad and I find enough problems, I write up all those problems and I get out of there and I just let them folks know, hey, the crawl space is in bad shape. Crawl space is in bad shape. Everything's wrong. Y'all need to have a lot of work done down there. Because sometimes a lot of bad crawl spaces with like a lot of bad water underneath them, insulation falling. A lot of them can have rodents and stuff down there. That becomes unsafe for us to be in. But you want your inspector to get as deep in there as they can and find everything they can. Yeah, if you've got a lot of rusty pipes down there, definitely want to have that looked at. If that's plumbing, even if that's sometimes you'll have metal supports down there, temporary supports down there that need to be replaced. So yeah, but you want them to go as far as they can, but we can't always get to everything because it just becomes unsafe down in some of those crawl spaces.
Okay. I'm going to let this be our last question. We have 191 people on the chat. This is going to be a good question because it's like after the fact, right? All right. So a couple of things. In the description of this video, I've done 3 videos with Jamal. So if he hasn't answered your question tonight, I'm sure he answered the question another night. So I'm going to put all 3 of those videos. And I think the moderator too is putting it in the chat. So make sure, so you're educated. One of the big things I try to do on this channel is make sure that you can talk intelligently to an inspector. You can talk intelligently to your agent, so the basics of what's going on, right? So do that. Jamal's information is in the description. My information is there. My masterclass is there. All right, let's get to this one. Sobins says, I bought a home 7 months ago. If I find the seller covered up problems that are now being revealed, do I have recourse with the inspector and the seller? I'm going to answer the question first. So it depends on what you mean by covered up, to be honest with you, like to be more specific. But I would say one of the agents hate, like when you close on something, I'll be looking at my phone. Like when y'all be calling a week later, I'm like, oh, what happened? Either you calling and say everything's great. So a lot of times y'all calling to say, now that I'm in here, I see this or that. There are going to be some things that once you live in a home, you're going to see that somebody that's only spent 2 hours, 3 hours in your home may not see. However, they shouldn't be the big things. For example, I had somebody call me after they were going to replace the flooring. They pulled up all the carpet and they saw like a little crack in the slab. That's something an inspector would have not seen. But if there were structural issues of the home, maybe they would have seen cracks in the walls or cracks in the, different things. That's not probably a big deal, right? But I think when you're living in a house, you expect perfection in other places. So I think my main advice to first-time home buyers is worry about the big, expensive things, your roof, your plumbing, your this, your that. But once you get in that house, and that should be all covered, right, through your inspection, you know how old the roof is, you know what condition it's in, You know how the HVAC is, all those expensive things, either expensive to do, hard to replace, all that kind of stuff. You focus on those major things. And so you may, once you live in there, find some of these minor things. I would say if it's something major that was totally overlooked, you probably do have recourse, but you need to look back through that inspection and make sure they didn't say, end of life, we recommend that you get a plumber out. We recommend, because sometimes those recommendations were made and you were like, we're moving forward anyway, because the inspector is not a plumber, they're not an electrician, they're not a roofer. So you have to do the extra due diligence sometimes to bring in somebody else to take another look at it. So yeah, make sure you're reading your inspection report fully. Most inspectors are insured. Agents, I'm telling you right now, yet the seller, unless they falsely said something. Let me give you an example. The seller said they were on sewer and they were on a septic tank, and they put that in the disclosure. The lady moves in and it's on septic tank, and the septic tank goes bad. Then she did have recourse. She went back to the seller, I think sued them in small claims court. You said the house is on sewer, it's on septic. Now I have recourse, because that's a clear, they did not disclose properly about the systems. So things like that, you would have recourse. But some of the things that you had the ability to look and the ability to see, then, that might not work. But I'll let Jamal professionally answer.
That was a great answer. You do have recourse if you can show where something was missed that should have been found based on the inspection and based on the severity of the issue. Depending on, if the seller is trying to hide something, and sometimes they are trying to hide something, yeah, you definitely do have recourse. But one thing I point people back to that I talked about earlier is standard operating procedures. So one thing you have to be careful with your inspector is, are they leaning too hard against standard operating procedures? I did a re-inspect on a home maybe about a year and a half or so ago, where a young kid had already inspected the house, and the lady was having a bunch of leaking issues in the house. They had just moved in, and her brother was taking a shower, and it just started leaking through into the basement. And so I come in, and she gives me his report, and I'm looking through it, and he hasn't done anything wrong. He went by standard operating procedures. So he didn't do anything wrong. But standard operating procedures say you turn the water on for 45 seconds at each tap. 45 seconds at each tap is not going to get you a leak. It's not going to show you a leak at all. Second they take a shower, leak shows up because he might have took a 15, 20, 30-minute shower. Well, now we got a leak. Now we got water dripping through the ceiling. So the kid didn't do anything wrong. He didn't, hide anything. Yeah. Right. But because he was operating within the standards, he missed things. Another thing that happened while I was there, because like I said, I run the water for 45 minutes to an hour. The whole front yard backed up because her septic tank was leaking. He's not going to find that going by standard operating procedures. She didn't know that was happening either. So it becomes a whole thing. You have to know you vetting your inspector, like the earlier question, vetting your inspector, knowing what their process is, how they're going to be checking things. That's another reason that I don't use the infrared camera. That's what he was using to check for leaks, but it lied to him because the leak was right next to a duct, and so it shows you hot and cold. Well, he saw cold, but it was next to a duct, so he thought it was the AC on when it was showing him a leak. It lied to him. And so you have to be careful with them telling you certain things like, oh yeah, I can see behind the walls. No, they can't. Are they doing things that are going to show them everything? Are they really pushing your house to its limits to try and see everything? And if they're doing the best that they possibly can do, yeah, I mean, we all miss things. When I first started, I missed stuff all the time. But I've gotten to the point now where I really don't anymore. I think the last thing I missed was a few years ago. Every once in a while, you have a day where just for whatever reason you didn't see everything, but you know it happens. And a good inspector should pay you back the money that you paid for the inspection when they miss something. But sometimes, like she said, you move into a house, this is your house now. Like this is your house now, and it's gonna have issues that were could not be seen by the inspector. There's only so much that I can do to this house to get it to show me its issues. At some point, you know, the fact of the matter is it's gonna do things that I can't see, and you have to be prepared for that. That is a big part of home ownership, is being prepared for the things that are going to happen. And like you said, too many new home buyers are real quick to blame somebody, and it's just like
Yeah,
I
because
can
they're
only see what I
not
can
like.
see.
Yeah, I think you said that in one of our earlier. Watch the replays of his old ones. He was like, the main thing is, hey, this is your house now. Like, there's no like, you can't call maintenance, and you have to.
You're the landlord.
Yeah, you're the landlord. Like, this is your house. There's nobody to call but you.
Yep.
So, but I would say if you really feel like there was some, improper disclosures, that sort of thing, or some fraud, that then it's worth you doing a consultation with an attorney and bring, what the issue is, bring the disclosures, bring what you have, and they could, see if you have a case necessarily against the seller, or they'll see if you have a case, you could see. And generally those might be $150 to $300 for the consultation, because you don't want to waste your time if they feel like, okay, you don't have a case. And it could be state dependent too. A lot of states are buyer beware. So you want to make sure that, but a lot of times also, if they were trying to defraud you in a way that, latent defects, any defects they're aware of in most states, they're supposed to tell you about, they're supposed to disclose. So
Right.
if they didn't do that, then it's worth, doing a consultation at least with an attorney. All right. Thank you so much, Jamal. I know I held you over. You guys watch
Oh,
all the
you're fine.
replays. Thank you so much. I think we had some good questions, good answers, and watch the replay. Thank you. And you have all his information in the comments. Thank you, Jamal. Have a good night.
Oh, you're welcome. It's always a pleasure.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.